Well, hello everyone, and welcome back once again to the VOV Network. My name is Brian Murray, and also joining me today is Mina. So, hello
Hey.
everyone, welcome. This is our first live stream, so bear with us. We're learning as we go, but that's always a good thing. That's what life is all about: new experiences and new challenges, and just working your way through it. So, Mina, say hello to everyone out there.
Hello. We're here.
We are here. So good morning for those of you who are in our time zone or close, and the
Uh,
rest is probably afternoon. Uh, Today's topic, we're actually going to be talking about something that's important to, we think, relationships, and that's about being true to yourself from an authentic or authenticity standpoint. And the main thing we want to do there is just kind of talk a little bit about, what it means to be authentic, being true to yourself, and then being true to the others that also involved with you in your life and in the important relationships in your life. And how we're going to go about this discussion is really two ways. First, we're going to talk about just some general definitions and an overview of what it means to be authentic or authenticity itself. And then the opposite side of that coin. So we have kind of a baseline, and that is to talk about being inauthentic and what the definitions or some of the things that would be to describe that. And then once we have that as our foundation, from there we'll take it and say, okay, let's apply what we've talked about, what we've learned, what we know now from a understanding and reality standpoint to the different relationships that are in our life and how we see those to be important to us, obviously. And then are we actually being one way or the other, and what we can do to better ourselves from that standpoint. So that's the overview and the objective of what we want to do today. Mina, is there anything you want to add to that from that standpoint?
no, let's get into it. Let's go. We could do this.
Okay. All right. Very good. So, as I was saying, the most important thing we're talking about today is just being authentic or being true to yourself. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by kind of looking at from the standpoint of what that means from a definition standpoint. So, we'll start with that. So, I'm going to share something here. I'm going to bring that up and bring that into the session, and we'll kind of just do a quick overview. All right. So, for right now, obviously, this the whole session is based on, as it says, this week's topic, authenticity, being true to yourself. And there's really two different ways, and I wanted to make this uh, clear from the standpoint of being true to yourself is actually a little bit different than being true from the standpoint of what you put out to the world, right? Because it's a little bit different thing. Being true to yourself is actually being more inward focused, is reflecting on what things are important to you, and then making sure that as you go through life and deal with relationships, that you're actually getting and receiving those things that you value to be the most important things. And that's really what the focus of this is today. So that's why we say being true to yourself. It's not so much about am I being authentic from the standpoint of how others perceive me, but
Right.
am I being authentic so that I am going about, as I interact with people, have different relationships, do different things in my life, that I'm actually receiving the things that I need so that I can continue to be authentic and true to myself. And that's why the title, Being True to Yourself, is what the focus of this is going to be. So as we move through that, then let's move on to the next slide. Um, so this is basically just a quick definition of what it means to be authentic. So some simple bullet points are very easy to follow. Obviously, it says first thing, be true to yourself, which is a very important thing, and that's the whole topic of what we have here. And then, as I just said, it's also about thinking inward and also looking outward. So see, a lot of the other side of what I was saying a moment ago is actually the opposite, where people are actually looking outward first and then seeing how they deal with that inwardly. What we
Mhm.
wanted to focus on here is just the opposite thing. We want to look at it from the standpoint of, to be truly authentic to yourself, you actually have to think inward first and then outward second. And that's a very important piece of it.
What
Um,
do can I interrupt for a second? What do you think are some of the reasons that people would look outward and then go inward?
that's a great question. What are your thoughts on that? Because that obviously is a very good question.
So I think it's a lot about knowing yourself and getting to know yourself and thinking inward. I think going outward would be making yourself fit into whatever someone else would want you to be, and not really thinking about what is important to you and what you want to see in your life, and making goals and all that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's wanting to please others. Just saying.
Excellent point. That's an excellent point. And I agree with you on that. And that's
Hmm.
kind of why we wanted to bring these things out, because we all feel like we have a certain understanding or a certain perception of different things. Just the word itself, being authentic or
Hmm.
authenticity. Our point today is let's break it down so that you really can truly, from your personal perspective,
Right.
reflect on it and see how you actually are applying what it means to your life and others in your life as you go through. So I think
Mhm.
that's a very important point, and I agree with you. And that's kind of what the second point here means, is talking about looking inward, or thinking inward versus looking outward first, which is, I think, an important thing. Moving on to the third bullet point, the way you treat others, and I think that's an important thing too. And that's both, just general kindness and respect is an important thing from being authentic. Uh, and sometimes that simply means, and we live in a world today that it is what it is, but we have to be so politically correct a lot of the times.
Mhm.
Um, and then which is good, but then that means we're not actually being truly respectful, because if we do have something that we think someone needs to hear or understand or know in a certain situation, we really actually need to share those things. But we get caught up so much in being PC, politically correct, and these other things, that sometimes we hold it back. So this is a very important one to know. um, and for me, the one thing with treat others with respect is understanding that that's a two-way street,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So how you treat others is in a reflection of how you also like to be treated. I think that's an
Mhm.
important thing. So as we go through that, that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to stay focused on too, is just understanding that, as you treat others, that's the behavior you typically will start to get back. So it's sometimes good for others to be able to give you some of that, the things maybe you don't really want to hear,
Right.
but it is the reality of what's going on, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it is it well, not sometimes, I think always it's a conscious effort to think about the way you treat others, because you may not be treating others very well, or you may not even done that for many years, but in the present it's very important, and to think about, make a conscious effort to think about how you're treating others, and always, and because it may not be your way. It may be a little self-centered.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah,
So that's a very important thing.
me
Um,
three.
Actually, let me go back. Got ahead of myself there.
Maybe.
Um, so next one on the list, live in the moment. And I think that's a big one too. I think that's the one thing that a lot of us are guilty of with life, is there's so much going on. I apologize for the noise, but can't control that.
Mhm.
Um, Living in the moment and being a good listener. So there's so much happening in our lives today, just on every level, from the pandemic to life to work to family, and just many, many different things that are going on. Um, and sometimes we get, I won't say overwhelmed, we start thinking too far ahead versus taking the time to actually be in the moment, appreciate and live in the moment. And that really matters when you are trying to be your true authentic self. Is just try to take a breath and
Yes.
gather yourself and be there, be in the moment, be engaged with the others that are there with you in those moments. And I think that's also a critical thing. Uh,
Not that planning isn't important. Planning is important, but living in the moment, thinking about what's going on, and putting our phones down for a little bit so that we can concentrate on what's going on around us and be active with our family members or friends or whoever we're around at the time, work, whatever it is. I know that there have been times when I'm at work, someone's talking to me, and I'm working on an email, typing or whatever.
mhm.
Kind of stop. If it's not an emergency, stop, take the moment, to recognize the person, listen to what they're saying. I may need to digest what they're saying for future reference. So, yeah, being in the moment, not so
Be in
caught
the
up
moment, yeah. And
electronic.
it's funny because in our introduction video, Mina, you talked about connection, right?
Right.
Which is one of your big things that you focus a lot on,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what this statement also ties back to, is being
It
in the
does.
moment, because
Yep.
that's the critical piece of having, maintaining, and keeping a strong
Mhm.
connection. Is you have to be there in the moment with the person that you want to have that
Mhm.
connection with. So I think that's a
And
very, very important thing.
and it ties back into the way you treat others also. Someone's
Yeah,
standing there trying to talk to you about whatever it is. It's rude and disrespectful to continue on with whatever email, whatever you're doing, and you're not getting what they're saying. And it's important to understand what they're saying. It might be important to you. It
agreed.
might be important to them.
I,
Maybe it's a situation where they need help and you're off doing something else. So it's important
yep,
to be in the moment.
I absolutely agree with that. Um, Moving on to the last bullet point here from the definition of being authentic, open-mindedness and fairness. And I think this is another area that a lot of the times people think that they're being that particular way. They're
Mhm.
being fair, and there's a difference too when we talk about especially fairness, because there's two different words and they really have two different meanings, and that's being equal and or having equity. And that's really two different things, right?
Mhm.
When you talk about that, because you hear people say, well, I want to be treated, the same. I want equality.
Mhm.
Well, equality is not the same as equity necessarily,
Mhm.
because it as far as how they're defined. So
Mhm.
fairness kind of fits into that same realm when you look at those things. And are you being fair? Are you treating um, just people equally and fairly across the board? Or are you having different judgments, different biases, different things like that with certain people, and then not being that way with others? And I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm saying that from a being authentic standpoint, that if you are, then whatever it is that you have a judgment or an issue with that individual, that's a conversation and some communication you need to have with them to try to help clarify and clear that up, so that that bias or judgment actually goes away. But if you just let it sit there and you don't address it, then you end up having, and one of the terms that's been out there for decades, obviously, and just years, is being two-faced, as they say. You're one way sometimes, and you're a different way to others, and
Mhm.
that's a very confusing thing. And that's really what this is talking about: being open-minded and also being fair. What do you think, Mina?
I'm really going back to where you said judgment, and oftentimes people are judgmental and may not recognize it, but in some ways they express it, and where they don't intend to. But open mindedness, I think, is really about letting the judgments go. And I say a lot of times, live and let live. I'll see things online or whatever, and I'll say, live and let live. It is
Mm-hmm.
what it is. Let them be what they be, or do what they do, as long as it's not hurting anyone or
Right,
themselves.
right.
Just leave it be.
Okay.
And I think that's a big part of open mindedness and fairness. Is who are you? Who are you to judge?
And I would agree with you on that 100%.
Mhm.
So then the last piece of this, just to summarize: so being true to yourself, thinking inward versus out, respect and kindness to others, uh, living in the moment, and listening,
Mhm.
as we know, is always important, and then having an open
Mhm.
mind, and being fair in general, and across the board is also an important thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to move on to the next slide. The next slide kind of talks about the opposite side of this coin, and it is kind of some of the definitions of what it means to be inauthentic, right? So I wanted to do that, as I say, coming into the video, to contrast the two, so that we can start to process in our own minds and our own individual situations, which one of these am I? Am I doing more of this, more of that, less of this, less of that,
Yeah.
so that you have an understanding, and then can start to maybe adjust some of your behaviors and different things in your
Mhm.
interactions, in the relationships that are important to you in your life. So let's look at the next slide.
Should we make one comment about We do have the comments area if people want to comment, and we can respond back to them later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Join.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, bring that up.
I'm just going to say there is a chat. And so if you have something that you want to say or you want to add, you're welcome to go into the chat and add. Right now, there's nothing there. I've got it open.
Okay.
So, but I'm watching it.
Okay. Yep. They absolutely can share and chat with us, and we can see that and respond, um, which is awesome. So,
Yes. Might take people a while before they feel comfortable with it, but by all means, join
yep,
us.
absolutely. So we'll go back to our slide here. And then, as we said, so now this is where we're talking about contrasting the opposite side of that coin, right? So, what is being inauthentic from that standpoint? So, and there's 8 bullet points on here, and we will run through them fairly quick. Now, and the first one I think is the critical one, because it really takes some self-awareness to be able to get to that. But it's, are you self-deceptive and unrealistic in their perceptions of reality? So this is one of the biggest points that I personally have talked about for years, is perception versus reality. Everything that I've really focused in on for years has been about that, because we all have a certain way we see whatever it may be. And that is in our eyesight and our minds and our hearts. That is the reality of it, because that is how we see it. However, there's the opposite side of that coin, and that is how others perceive it, right? You may think that their perception of you, the situation, whatever it is the same as you see it. But that's where the gap comes in. So clarifying what you think the reality is versus how others are perceiving that same scenario is one of the most critical things I think that gets overlooked a lot of the times. And that's across the board. That's relationships, that's work, that's just everywhere in your life, because you have this certain way that you're looking at certain things. And in this particular instance, they're asking that question of, are you being self-deceptive? And that's deep. We'll dive a little bit more into that a little bit later, but let's continue through the points. Mina, you have anything you want to add on number 1 before I jump to number 2?
Yes, because the statement is self-deceptive. So, are you? It's okay to be a dreamer and want and desire. That's one thing. But how you view a situation or yourself, self-deceptive, is important, and it may not be what the reality is. And so it's nice to get feedback from others, talk to others, and find out, what they see. Because oftentimes we say perception is reality. So if I'm self-deceiving, I believe that.
Right.
And no one can tell me anything, right?
Right.
So getting feedback from others that you trust.
Exactly.
I often tell my own child, ask somebody you really trust, to get more feedback than just me, right?
Absolutely right. Right.
But yeah.
And that's a great point too, that you just brought up about where you, the sources that you seek to get the feedback, right? Because that makes a huge difference when you think about that, because obviously sometimes those that are closest to you, they may have an opinion, but they won't necessarily share that opinion because they know you, they think you might be too sensitive to it, that it might hurt your feelings, right? But that's part of this whole topic today, is about being authentic.
Right.
So in those moments, in those times, that's when you have to figure out, okay, I need to be able to share this and communicate whatever it is you need to with this person. And if I don't, then I'm not being authentic to me either, right? So that's the key. We've got to be able to get those things out, talk about them, and stay true and authentic to ourselves as well as to others. So I think that's very important. Moving on, number 2, looking to others for approval, or to feel valued. And this is, again, all about, sometimes self deprivation, some other things, trying to, looking at it from the standpoint of that what you bring to the table is all about the other person versus looking more, as it said in the previous slide, looking more inward, right? Seeing your own self-worth, your own self-value, right, is a very important thing. I mean, I know you have some things to share about that.
Know your freaking worth. No, just nothing more. We already kind of added on the first slide, but yeah, looking inward and knowing your worth, knowing what you desire, know what you think a situation should be, and talking about it, being open.
Absolutely. A very, very important thing. Number three, are you judgmental of other people? And again, we talked about that at some level too.
Mhm.
Um, and it's one of those things in life. I mean, we had this discussion not too long ago. We were talking about just the thing of being judgmental from the standpoint of a lot of the times we're on the outside looking in. So we
Yeah.
see a certain situation, right? And we think, oh, I know what's going on there. And they think
Mhm.
they're this and they think they're that and blah, blah, blah. But we actually really don't know
Right.
the true details of what's happening there, because whatever is happening in their relationship, in their home, in their business, I mean, whatever it might be, we're actually outsiders to it. So we are placing this judgment on X situation when we really don't even know the actual details
Right.
of what's happening there. So I think that's a very important one to be cognizant of for yourself
Mhm.
is, are you being judgmental?
Yep.
Um, and then kind of take that step back away from that, because you are probably making a judgment without all of the information to
Mhm.
actually even make that leap of faith, right? So
Right.
what do you think about that?
Agree.
Yeah,
Totally agree. I mean, it's not easy because we all grow up with biases, and no one is devoid of bias. So
right.
yeah, sometimes you are in that light, but it's something you want to strive for. If you want to be authentic, you want to strive to not be judgmental.
Absolutely.
Right.
I could
Somebody
not
said
agree more.
hi, but I don't know who that is. Hey, hey.
All
Okay, go
right.
ahead.
Yep. Welcome them in. All right.
Welcome,
So
welcome.
number four, do not think things through clearly. So, and again, that's basically saying you're
Thank you.
being more reactive than proactive, right? And
Mhm.
that's what happens a lot of the times. You're reacting to things without actually, as I said, taking that moment, taking that heartbeat to say, okay, really, what's going on here? And okay, now I have a better grasp or understanding.
Right,
Then you take the action or the step, right? And
right.
so you're being more reactive than proactive,
Mhm.
and that's another important one to watch out for.
Right.
Number five. Have a hostile sense of humor. I read that one and I got a good laugh out of it. And I see Mina's cracking up as well. Because I think we both know some people who have
Yeah.
that as,
Yes, we
we'll
do.
use
Yeah.
the term, part of their personalities.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
and, you know, sense of humor is obviously a good thing. And it's an important thing that you do have that. But when it's truly hostile, you are using that humor to degrade and bring down and belittle and some other things, and it is intentional,
Right.
then that's a whole different level. And I know you
Mhm.
have something you want to add on that.
Oh no, not really. I just was thinking back to a time I worked in an office where that was the culture,
Yeah,
and I wasn't built for it initially. I had to get used to it and work with it and speak up. But yeah, when I first got there, it was just really hard for me, and I didn't understand. But eventually, I realized that was the culture
that
of
was
their
the
life.
culture.
Not making it right, but that was their culture. So
So let me ask a follow-up question to that, because that's a great point. In that, being in that office, and obviously it's a place you have to go daily and you work
mhm,
and different things like that, what did you choose to do personally? Did you say,
mhm.
okay, I need to be part of the team, so I'm going to shift and be them and do what they do? Or did you keep yourself as an outsider and not move in that direction?
Well, it's not really my personality to be that way. I might make a joke here or there, and I am a jokey joke, but mean, hostile, no, that's never my way. So for me, I would speak up. I didn't really fit into that, and eventually, I moved away from that office, and was so happy to, because people I was with, we all were crazy about each other. We loved each other. We and so we ended up working together, and it was really nice. But in that location, in that environment I was in, it just wasn't normal for me. It wasn't anything I could feed into. Every now and then I might snap back with something, but
Hmm.
I just really needed to move on to something else. And I
Got
was
it.
so happy that I did.
We're going to come back to that because that's an important point. So
Mhm.
I'll come back to that in a second. Um, Going on to number 6. So, are you able to express or unable to express their emotions freely and clearly?
Mhm.
And again, this is kind of tied back to number 4. They're kind of tied together in some ways about thinking
Mhm.
things through or thinking clearly, right? So, being able to express what it is you truly mean, what you truly feel. Um, and that even ties back to the first one about um, reality versus perception, because all those
Mhm.
things, if you cannot clearly define what it is, because maybe you're being self-deceptive, so you can't really
Mhm.
wrap your head around what it is you want to say, etc. So those things are all kind of woven together from that standpoint. But very, very important that you're able to, from an emotional uh, self-care standpoint, be able to express um, what's important to you, and to be able to do that clearly and is very important.
Yeah, I think for some people they need to think about it. Sit back. I mean, I've met people that have sat back, need to sit back, think about a situation, and get their head wrapped around it, and then they're able to express their emotions freely or clearly. That's difficult. Also, it's difficult to be involved with a person, whether it's work, family, home, whatever it is that needs to do that. But there are, I
Yeah,
must say, there are
absolutely.
a lot of people that do that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mhm.
All right, so number 7, are not open to learning from their mistakes. So, and the way that's worded, I challenge it a little bit, but
Mhm.
because I don't think it's not open to it. Some people just like running into that wall over and over and over, and I don't know,
Mhm.
why that is. Because obviously, none of us are perfect. We're all going to
Right.
make mistakes, right? That is part of life and being human, because we're not perfect people.
Mhm.
But when we do have something, and what's that definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and
Yeah,
over and
over
over,
and
and
over, getting the same
expect to
result.
want to get a different result, right? Um,
Yeah.
so being able to learn from those mistakes, say, you
Mhm.
know what, I probably should do that again. And what probably will happen is you probably will do it a second time, and maybe even a third time, because that's the
Yeah.
imperfection in who we are as
Mhm.
people. But
Truly
at
do.
some point, it needs to register with you and say, you know what,
Mhm.
I'm not going to do that again. I've learned from
Right.
that particular mistake, and I think that's
Mhm.
important. What do you think, Mina? How do you
I
feel about?
agree.
Oh,
Totally agree. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think mistakes are how we learn and develop.
yeah,
But when we keep bumping our head in the same thing over and over and over, and I can't say that I have not been there. We,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, right. Somebody said, right. You keep bumping your head on the same thing, and eventually you need to do something different. You may not be comfortable with it. It may be a state that you've been in over and over, and that's what you're comfortable with, even though you don't like it. It's
right,
it's the same old comfort, but which really is a comfort. But yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
then number 8, you don't understand their motivations, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things too, is you have someone, and it's really because I'm going to use this old school term, which is wishy-washy, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of all over the place.
Mhm.
You don't know what their true intentions are, because they're so inauthentic to themselves. That's
Right.
how they're seen by the world too, right?
Mhm.
So they're just all over the place. They're scattered.
Mhm.
So when you are dealing with someone like that, it's really hard to get a grasp on who they
Right.
are, what they're about, what's important to them, and
Mhm.
all those different things. So
Mhm.
that's a huge challenge when you can't get a feel for what someone's motivations, and another
Mhm.
good word to substitute, or their intentions, right?
Right.
Especially when we talk about relationships.
Right.
What is your intention in this exchange that we're having,
Mhm.
whatever, based on the type of relationship that it is, right?
Right.
So very important one.
And sometimes intentions are hidden, and
Very much so.
they don't try to hide the intentions, or they do, and it like you said, it's wishy-washy. It's not, it's not open. You don't really know intentions. And I'm not talking about the specifically the unauthentic person. It could be either side for
Hmm.
whatever reasons don't want to um, make people know what those intentions are. So it might look like one thing, but it's really something else. So
Absolutely.
it can be that also.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying a positive or negative. I'm not saying that a person is trying to be deceitful in it, but maybe have underlying motivations or desires, but what's coming out is something else because of the person they're dealing with. And it goes back to being unauthentic with yourself, being
Right.
deceptive. So,
I agree.
yeah. Hmm.
So one of the things I want to go back to, because I mentioned it earlier, and we were talking about this is point I think number 5, the hostile workplace from the standpoint of
Yeah, yeah,
sense
yeah.
of humor, right? So I wanted to go back there because I asked the question earlier of you about how did you deal with that,
Hmm.
and I wanted to revisit that because that actually in your answer kind of addresses what we mean about choosing to be authentic or
Right,
inauthentic, right?
right.
Because what you chose to do in that scenario is you said
Yeah.
that's not you, right? So
Hmm.
you chose to remain your authentic self. You said, okay,
Hmm.
I either need to figure out a way to remove myself from the
Hmm.
situation. You voiced your opinion about what was going on in the situation,
Hmm.
uh, and why you didn't think it was proper or the right thing to do, versus just saying acquiesce and say, okay, I'm going to be part of the team and I'm going to do exactly what they do, which takes you right to what this slide describes, and that is now you're not being the true Mina, you're being an inauthentic Mina
Hmm.
when you make those exceptions. So that's an excellent point. That's why I wanted to come back to it, just to say that's really what we're talking about today. Uh, the difference between trying to be true to yourself and remain that way versus shifting to the inauthentic side of it just to be part of the group, part of the team, fit in, whatever terms that we're
Hmm.
talking about here. And that's really not necessary. You should be able to stand up for self, especially when you go back and you do it from the standpoint of filtering it through where we started,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So this is how you approach it. Stand on that and
Hmm.
be okay with that. I think is a very important thing. Any final comments before we move on to
Yeah,
the
there are levels to that too, if you think about it. So that's work.
Mhm.
But are you authentic outside of work when dealing with other relationships? So in that work environment, you have programs that can back you up and help you out. So you can
Yep.
go to them. But
Right.
what about in your personal life and your relationships there? It could be family, it could be romantic, it could be, just friends.
Right.
And in those relationships, are you being authentic there too? Right?
Absolutely.
So there's levels. It's not just, oh, make sure that you don't have this problem at work, but what about everywhere else? So
What about
I
everywhere
think
else?
there's levels to it.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. So let's move on. We're going to go back to the next slide here. So this is kind of the summary of all things. So this is the question for today. We've talked about what the definition at a general level of being authentic is, what that means from being true to yourself. We've talked about what it means to be inauthentic, right? And some of the things that relate to that. So then our question today is, which are you in most of you important relationships, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's the burning question, right? Which one are we being in our most important relationships? And that's the whole point, right? That's the reason for this video today, and that's the focus of what the VOV network is really all about, is to talk about how things apply back to our relationships, and
Mhm.
the different things that we do and how we continue to grow and develop. And as we say, our tagline is to be able to cultivate, um, enhance, and preserve
Right.
stronger, better relationships. So thinking from an being authentic or authenticity standpoint, based on what we've learned today, I can look back historically and I can think of some very specific
Yeah.
times when, yeah, I wasn't being authentic because I had changed who I was, adapted my behavior for whatever reason to try to support that particular relationship, right? But all that actually ends up doing is it creates tension and it creates stress within the relationship. So you think you're doing the right thing by doing that to try to, you know, quote unquote, make things work, the air quotes, as they say, to do that. But what you're actually doing, because long term, you are not you in that scenario. So you're creating this self tension, this self stress that it's going to play out into the relationship in some way, whether it's being rebellious, so you start acting out, you have brings about arguments, all these different types of things because you're not being true to yourself. I mean, what's your perspective on that?
I agree, and I think it's for me. Like I said, I didn't say it because I didn't understand it. Um, there are levels, and so you can be the strongest and the most authentic person you can be in one area, and then another area not be. So I really think this is an important subject. It's a baseline for some of the things you deal with in relationships. So that this is important.
It is important.
Mhm.
It's a very important thing, and that's why we wanted to kind of bring this up today. And as in one of the terms, I mean, and I had a discussion before we started this today, and I used the term filter, and really that's really what how we wanted to look at this, to say from a being authentic, being true to yourself standpoint, using that as a filter,
Mhm.
right? And so when you're starting to have new interactions, or if you have an existing relationship or interaction, being using authenticity as a filter, where are you on that scale of being authentic and true to yourself versus being inauthentic, right? And then really starting to value the importance of being more on the true to yourself side of it
Mhm.
versus the opposite side. And
Mhm.
that's really what this was about, is to say, and think of
Mhm.
it from that standpoint as a mindset, that's what you want to do, is you want to start to use what we've learned today as a filter for your interactions, your general relationships, just a general approach to life. I think
Right.
is going to be one of the big keys there. Uh, so that's my thought. Mina, what anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap this up for today?
No, not on the subject. I'm great on the subject, what we've put out, and I think we could use some more interaction in that comments box. I hope we get some comments, and if you're watching the video later after the live, do a hashtag replay, and you can make comments. We'll comment
Absolutely.
after
And
that.
what we'll be doing going forward is, obviously we will look for more interaction during the sessions, but also we will be, with the replays, you can see there, you can also leave comments,
Hmm.
and all of our social media platforms. If you see this there, we're streaming this obviously live at the moment onto our Facebook group, and then also streaming it live to YouTube. So YouTube, you can replay. You can always find it in our Facebook group to be able to replay. And we will be monitoring any comments or any feedback that you have at that particular point in time when you do get a chance to watch the video.
Hmm.
Um, but we think it's very important. Again, as we said in our introduction video, what we're doing is, yes, it's me and I, and we're the talking heads that are here. But why we're doing this is really to help and benefit everyone that's out there, right?
Right.
So how you interact with the information, the feedback, the discussion that we can have, whether that in general or specifically helps you as an individual, or if you have something you want to share, maybe as an experience, maybe it's a certain way that you do or manage something in your world and in your life that may help others, post that as well.
Yeah.
Because all of that knowledge and all of that information that we share amongst each other is going to be the most important part of it. And that's really what we want to see as we move forward, is to really get kind of a knowledge base and an interactive group where we are supportive and provide guidance and insight so that we can all benefit from it. And that's going
Right.
to be the key. Absolutely.
You're
So
welcome. Someone said thank you both. Great topic.
Oh, awesome.
But
Well,
they're probably not a member of the group, so that's why it says Facebook user.
that's fine. And sometimes with Facebook, it won't allow, if they don't have the privacy settings set a certain way, it
Right.
actually will block their username anyway. So,
Okay.
but it's
Well, we
good to
love
see
you.
that people are responding. And, again, this is our first one. We plan to do one every Saturday. And just to give you a kind of an advanced notice, we kind of have a little bit of a schedule laid out. So our topic for next week is going to be one that very important in relationships, and that is passive aggressive behavior. And I think we all can relate to that in many different levels. And again, we're going to approach it in the same fashion. What is it about, the good and the bad sides of it? Is it something that I'm doing and don't even know it, to open your eyes from that standpoint?
All you, don't you know that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think for the third session, we might get into this new phenomena that's out there in the world in lots of different ways, and that's ghosting, or being ghosted. And it's happening not just in relationships, but even employers and employment, and it's this whole thing that's taken on a life of itself. So we're going to probably talk about that too as one of our subjects coming up. So much more to come. We're excited. This is a great platform to start to talk about these things and make it more interactive again, because it is about what you share. I mean, anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap our session for today?
Not today. I'm just really glad everybody that watched or will watch in the future. Thank you for supporting us. And please hashtag replay if you watch this on a replay, and like, subscribe to us.
Absolutely. Yep. Definitely like and subscribe. And again, just YouTube subscribe so you get the notifications. We'll be letting people know when we schedule the live streams there. Again, our Facebook group, the VOV Network group, definitely join, because we'll be streaming to both locations. And then we have a Facebook VOV network page, so be sure you can check that out. There's lots of articles and information that's also pasted there. So like that page, and that way you'll see the new information that gets posted there as well. So again, we look forward to continuing to go on this journey with you. Again, the more input and the more feedback we get from you folks out there, the better this is going to be for all of us. So let's continue to move forward.
Sorry.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Let's go. Somebody said looking forward to the topic ghosting. Me too.
Ghosting.
I hope y'all participate.
Yeah. It's that
You
one's a good one.
Right?
Yes. Ghosting is going to be an interesting one, as well as passive aggressive, because a lot of people don't realize that they're being passive aggressive. That's the thing about passive aggressive behavior, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be a good discussion next week. That's all I have. Anything else before we wrap this up?
I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Yay.
Take care. We'll say aloha and goodbye from the VOV network for this weekend, and we will see you all next Saturday. Take care. Be safe.
Bye-bye.